This morning, casinos in Texas. A GOP mega donor helped conservatives maintain their majority in the Texas House. Now he wants lawmakers to approve casinos in this state. The Texas Attorney General making a last-ditch effort to give Donald Trump 4 more years. But what is Ken Paxton's strategy in this latest lawsuit? Call 911 in San Antonio, you could get an ambulance, or maybe telemedicine. We'll talk to Mayor Nirenberg about this first-of-its-kind idea in Texas and how it's already saving taxpayer money there. And Texas Democrats calling for a leadership change at the top of their party. We'll talk to one of the women on the committee suggesting what the party might do moving forward.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. Before we get to our guests from across the state, let's first catch you up on the top political headlines here in Texas. Hundreds of thousands of Texans are going into this week with some anxiety. If Congressional Democrats at least cannot come to an agreement on a new stimulus bill, then 315,000 gig workers in our state are going to lose their unemployment benefits. Congressional Democrats extended their deadline until Wednesday to reach an agreement with the Trump administration. As the vaccine begins to arrive in Texas this week, Texas Ag Commissioner Sid Miller says he now has the coronavirus. Miller said he's not feeling his best, but says he has survived everything from rodeo injuries to cancer in the past. 3 members on the State Board of Education have also tested positive after they attended an in-person meeting. And Mansfield, that city made history last week. For the first time in 130 years, the city of Mansfield elected a black man as mayor. Dr. Michael Evans Sr. there won an election with 52% of the vote. He's senior pastor at Bethlehem Baptist Church there in Tarrant County. Let's begin, though, this morning with the COVID vaccine, likely coming to Texas as early as this week. Healthcare workers are the first to get the injections, but there is a new push right now to prioritize school teachers. The mayor of San Antonio is one of those behind this push. Mayor Nirenberg joined us from his office there at City Hall to discuss that and several other issues.
Mayor, good to see you again. Thanks for the time.
You too, Jason.
You just sent a letter to the governor asking that school teachers be given priority for the COVID vaccine. You're also asking for regular COVID testing at schools. I'm just curious, though, with the surge in cases that you're seeing in San Antonio, should students even be going to in-person classes right now?
Well, our public health authority has urged parents and schools to consider going to a virtual learning environment for now, particularly as we get through this spike. But as we know in Texas, our local schools have their hands tied with regard to the jurisdiction of the TEA as demonstrated by the Attorney General and others. So what we're doing is making sure that we continue with our health directives. And our public health authority has been very clear that right now it's very difficult. And if virtual learning can be done, it should be done at this moment.
Mayor, let's stick with health just for a moment here. On Thursday, last Thursday, is when council approved telemedicine for people calling 911, for certain calls to 911, and you guys are the first in the state doing this. Explain how this works. If I call in and I have something wrong, is my call kind of filtered out first to determine whether I actually need an ambulance or whether someone can solve it over the phone?
Well, so I think it would be difficult to overstate the potential that this kind of emergency response protocol might have to not only save taxpayer dollars, but potentially also to save lives and save resources where they're desperately needed. So the San Antonio Fire Department, in its tradition of innovation, is beginning to route dispatch calls to telemedicine to help weed out potential responses that can be done without actually sending units on site. It's already borne fruit for us as a city. We've seen a number of calls already saved in terms of not having to send out emergency units where they're not necessarily needed. And we hope that this continues to grow. But we're very excited, and the City Council ratified this program just this morning.
Yeah, that's astounding. And I guess with less revenue coming into the city, there are some cost savings there. What kind of numbers are you seeing so far?
I think what we saw today is we had just under 1,000 calls that were logged in, with using this protocol. It's been in place since roughly October, and we're going to continue to track it. But already, again, we're seeing greater efficiency, and greater efficiency also potentially means lives saved in our community when it comes to emergency response.
Mayor, I want to ask you about casinos. That's one of the things we're talking about on our program today. San Antonio is obviously a huge destination for people across the country, and there's a big push in the legislature next month to legalize it next year. Would you support gaming in your city?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think that legalized gambling is a proper foray at this moment, especially with such economic desperation that's happening in the pandemic world right now, and will be for quite some time. I think we need to focus on our priorities. We have to get people back to work safely. We have to ensure we have a proper health response, and we have to get our communities back on their feet.
And Mayor, I presume with the pandemic that you have probably quite a long legislative wish list for lawmakers in Austin when they return next month. Give us an idea, top 2 or 3 things on there. What do you want to see them do?
I think we have to support the workforce. Primarily, again, we're not out of the woods here. In the first half of the year, while we're in session, is likely going to be continuing under the specter of COVID-19 and the pandemic. So we have to make sure that we have a robust health response. But also, this is going to be the first efforts towards a robust economic recovery. Here in the city of San Antonio, we put our own local resources without raising taxes towards getting people back to work safely. Support from our legislature to enhance those efforts to protect educational access in our communities, to ensure that we have workforce development programs that are robust enough to recognize the changing economies. And of course, we need proper investment in our health infrastructure.
All right. Mayor Ron Nirenberg, good to see you again. Thank you.
You too. Thanks, Jason.
Let's shift off now to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. You probably know by now he's making national news again. He filed a lawsuit last week, a last-ditch effort to swing the presidential election to Donald Trump. This is what happened. Paxton sued 4 fellow states, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, despite courts already ruling that there's no evidence of widespread fraud. Paxton's suit says these states have policies in place that makes voter fraud undetectable. It's a head scratcher. Kay Granger doesn't really know about it. John Cornyn says it's kind of out there. So let's get to Ross Ramsey, the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. Good morning to you, Ross.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Doing well here. Paxton's lawsuit, what's his political strategy behind this?
Well, I think it is all politics. The legal community was very critical of this filing, and the politics are pretty clear. He's aligning himself with the president. The president remains popular with Republican voters. A number of members of the Texas Congressional delegation signed a letter saying, they were with him on this. The politics are pretty clear. The law is pretty fuzzy.
Yeah, and we'll wait and see what the Supreme Court does. Let's talk about the Texas Senate when they reconvene next month. The GOP, Dan Patrick wants to change the rules to really cement Republican control and take more senators, or fewer senators rather, I guess, to get bills onto the floor, right?
Yeah, they have this arcane rule that you have to have a super majority of the Senate. Right now it's 19 members in order to bring a bill to the floor for debate. If you don't have 19 senators, you can't bring it up. There happen to be 19 Republicans. One Republican lost in the elections November 3rd, and the lieutenant governor wants to lower that to 18, which would give the Republicans continuing control. There's some controversy in the Senate about this. There's some talk about it. I think they'll probably do it, but it's one of the first things that'll happen in January, and it sets Dan Patrick up, if it happens, to keep his iron hold on the Texas Senate. All
right, we shall see. Ross, back to you in a moment. Thank you. Coming up, some Texas Democrats asking for change at the top of their party. In just a moment, we'll speak with a Dallas Democrat who might have a say in what happens. And how likely is a stimulus bill before Christmas? We pressed Fort Worth Congressman Mark Vesey on that question. The interview is coming up. You're watching Inside Texas Politics. Some Texas Democrats want a change at the top of their party, saying leadership squandered opportunity last month in the November election. So the chairman of the Texas Democrats state party set up a committee to look into what happened and to make recommendations about how the state party should proceed from here. One of those members is with us this morning. It's Krista Castaneda, a Dallas attorney. Good morning to you.
Hi.
Let me ask you the bottom line question. You're a Democrat. You have been for a long time. Do you agree that there should be a change in state party leadership?
I agree that we need to do everything we can to position ourselves for 2022, but I do not fault the leadership. I think that we have grown by leaps and bounds over the last couple of cycles and in the last 6 months, and we just need to accumulate our growth and get all the cylinders firing in the same direction to win in 2022.
And Krista, considering that, then what do you think happened last month to Texas Democrats?
I think there were two waves, a blue wave and a bigger red wave, and the red wave started ahead. I think some of it had to do with the Trump phenomenon, but look, we're closing the gap. We closed the gap year over year, and we're getting closer every cycle.
Yeah, indeed, Texas Democrats are doing a great job in narrowing that gap, and they have been consistently. But what do you think it's going to take? Is it just time alone, Krista, that will put Democrats back into some state roles?
Well, our numbers show that the number of Democratic voters are increasing year over year. And in fact, in my election and all statewide elections, we all earned more votes than Abbott did in his reelection campaign. So clearly the numbers are there. We've just got to reach more rural voters with the Democratic message.
Yeah, of course, the rural voters are the issue for Democrats and urban voters are issue for Republicans. Let me ask you about that because you said that you were a candidate. Obviously, you ran for the Railroad Commission in November. Is this appointment to this committee personal at all for you? Do you want to get in there and dig around and find out what in the world happened?
I want to do whatever we need to do to convince as many Texans as possible that the Democratic message is the winning message so that we can move the state forward. We're all about trying to make a better Texas. And so in that sense, it's personal, but it's as personal as it is to all Texas.
All right. Krista Castaneda, good to see you again. And we'll be watching to see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like Congress might finally do something about what many Black and Hispanic families have complained about for generations. Some banks exclude lower income areas, just don't make loans there. This is a must-watch story that WFAA did last week, and there is a call now for congressional hearings on it. On the latest episode of Y'all-itics, Fort Worth Congressman Mark Vesey says he's all for it. Vesey said that lack of access to loans exacerbates the racial wealth gap, and that can affect generations.
Yeah, for generations. I mean, if you look at Black wealth in this country, one of the reasons why Black wealth oftentimes lags behind other demographics in this country is certainly tied directly to home values. And with banks not making that same level of investment and loan opportunities in Black communities as they do others, it contributes to that lower household income and wealth that I just mentioned and talked about. And it really does tie directly back to banks and a lot of their inactions.
So the first step in this, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, who is a Democrat, represents the eastern side of your district, essentially the other side of your district, in southern Dallas. She said that she's interested in holding hearings on this to get answers from the banks. But Congressman, you've been in Congress a long time, and you and I both know there's a big difference between hearings and something actionable, which is what people have wanted for so long. Do you see legislation coming out of these hearings?
There has to be some legislation that comes out of these hearings. And I also think with a president that actually will listen to representatives like myself and Colin Aldred and Eddie Bernice Johnson on a lot of these issues that face the Black community, I think that it may help the banks and incentivize them a little bit to step their game up and start doing the right thing. I mean, look, I think that it's no mistake that, I'm sorry, I don't think it's any accident, I should say, that the situation has probably gotten worse, under Trump. when you consider the fact that he was actually had to settle with the federal government because he was discriminating by not allowing blacks to live in the buildings that he and his father owned. And so if you have that sort of situation, obviously the banks are going to think that they can get away with whatever they want to. And so even though this is a problem that, dates back before, my guess is that for the last 4 years, banks have probably thought that they can do whatever they please.
Congressman, since we have you on the line here, I do want to ask different topics, same lines here, though. The stimulus, briefly, do you anticipate that the House and the Senate can come together before the end of the year to give people a second stimulus check? How likely is that by the end of the year?
We have to get something passed. And not only do we need to get something passed, I mean, if you listen very closely to what Dr. Redfield is saying and Dr. Fauci is saying, you're looking at, once we do this first round of nursing homes and hospital workers and then move to the second round, you're looking at the fall before you finally get to the point to where we can take our mask off and go back into society. And the fall is very generous if you think about the fact that we have to get a lot of people that are anti-vaxxers, people that don't trust this vaccine because of historical discriminations like what we're talking about right now. We have to figure out a way how we're going to get close to 300 million people vaccinated so this virus doesn't have a host
but Congressman,
in the next 9 months.
If you were to get on a plane and head out to Vegas and put a wager on this, what are the chances that the Republicans in the Senate and Democrats in the House will be able to come together in a compromise to get a second stimulus passed?
I think that I feel good that we'll be able to get something passed before we leave and go home by the end of this week. That will help out because people are going to need those checks. If those checks are not in the economy, particularly because of right now we're coming up on the Christmas season, it's just going to make everything so much more dramatically worse.
That's just an excerpt of this podcast we wanted to share with you there. Congressman Vesey, just part of this episode. Podcast is out right now. So if your phone is handy, open the camera on the phone, aim it at the QR code there on the right side of your screen. It will take you directly to it. The podcast is called Y'all-itics. We drop brand new episodes every Tuesday. Coming up, casinos in Texas. It could help the state budget. And a GOP megadonor is lobbying to make that happen. One of our topics next on the roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross is back with us. We have Bud Kennedy from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram every week. And in for Bernadine this week is Abby Livingston, the D.C. Bureau Chief for the Texas Tribune. And Abby, we're starting with you with a state issue, but has some national implications. There is a push right now to get casinos in Texas. At least Shelton Adelson from the Sands Casino Corporation out in Vegas is hiring lobbyists to try to make that happen here in Texas. Republicans are still in control. How likely is that to happen in this state?
Well, Adelson invested big in Texas, and I think it's still unclear how this pans out. But this is a unique situation given Texas's place in national politics. Usually it's Texas big oil donors, typically on the Republican side, who have influence on politics beyond Texas. And this is an instance where the reverse is happening.
But what do you think about this? Because the incoming speaker, Dade Phelan, he's from Beaumont, and there's probably a lot of interest in keeping jobs and things like that going to Lake Charles there.
Right. Nobody wants to lose Tillman Fertitta's casinos in Louisiana or lose those jobs. If you live in Beaumont or Port Arthur, you work at the casino, you don't want to lose that. If they brought casinos to Port Arthur to restore windstorm damage, maybe something like that might work. I've always said the idea was just to move casinos just inside the state line. The Choctaws might have to invest some money in Sherman-Denison.
That's a good point. Ross, what's the likelihood of this at the end of the day? Because it was Shelton Adelson's wife who donated a lot of money to House Republicans, and the House Republicans kept their majority in the Texas House.
The outside politics all line up, but the inside politics are a little tougher. The Texas legislature hasn't approved any major expansion of gaming in almost 30 years since the lottery passed in 1991. Every time that they've done it, whether it was lottery, bingo, parimutuel wagering, it's been in the face of a big budget crisis. So what the casinos are counting on here, I think, is a really tough budget for Texas legislators. We'll get the numbers on that in about a month and see how the budget shakes out. and then we'll see if they need to scrounge for money.
Yeah, we shall see. Abby, let's switch back to you, because a lot of people are talking about budget crises right now, especially in everyone's household. How likely is a stimulus bill on Capitol Hill by that Wednesday deadline that congressional Democrats have set?
It feels very grim. Now, what's going on is Senator McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, and Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, they're very good deal makers. But this is such a symptom that this is uncertain, that Congress is just becoming closer and closer to ungovernable. And they may have to concede major aspects that they desperately want on each side to get this deal done. At the same time, there may be money, there may be a deal, and a popular program called the People Business Loan Program. But it's very sad that American lives and livelihoods are on the line and Congress can't crank something out.
Yeah, indeed so. But if a deal does not get done, which party gets the blame on this?
Oh, yeah, and people should be paying more attention. We're looking at more evictions. We're looking at no unemployment benefits for a lot of Texans. People should be talking to their congressman, congresswoman, and telling them work on this instead of signing on to some bill about some other state's elections.
How likely is that, though? I mean, I'm sure congressional representatives, Ross, get all kinds of email and mail and things like that. But is that really going to sway anything here, or is this still about politics, partisan politics?
I think short term it's about politics. Just a little bit longer term, this is something that the legislature might have to address if Congress doesn't. The problems that this second CARES Act might take care of, or some of them, would fall to the state government if the federal government doesn't step up. So I imagine some of the calls they're getting in Washington are coming from state representatives and state senators in Texas.
Wow. All right, guys, thanks so much. Abby, good to see you as well, too. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you watching as well. We'll be back again next Sunday with another episode of Inside Texas Politics. Hope you have a good week.